Oi. All right, that's all the Portuguese I have for you. The rest is in English, sorry. My name is Mark Wolly. I'm a product specialist covering our mobile suite, our entire mobile publisher ad suite. I'm based out of San Francisco, and I'm thrilled to be here, so thanks for having me. Let's see. What I'd like to cover today is actually crafting your mobile strategy, not just your app strategy. What I thought I'd cover is first talking about mobile penetration, how people are accessing the internet. Then we'll dig deeper into apps, look at mobile web, and then we'll bring it together with prioritizing your mobile strategy. So I've been at Google over 8 years, and my mobile journey with the company sort of started at our sales conference in 2008. And at that time, this was pre-Android, pre-iPhone. We had someone who came in to speak to us about the future and the future of mobile. And it hadn't yet hit the United States, but it had hit Japan. And he talked about what was going on in Japan, that people in Japan had their phones on them 22 out of 24 hours a day. And they were so crazy that they slept next to their phones. I thought this was nuts. I had a flip phone at the time. I had no idea. But I think you know where this story is going because that trend moved west and it's moved south too. I now sleep right next to my phone. And last night when I had to plug my phone in across the room, I got anxious. So we've been looking for a long time at these line graphs of when mobile is going to pass the desktop in terms of time spent, in terms of impressions, and in terms of revenue. And we've been waiting for years to understand, is this the year of mobile? And it turned into a joke, but it's now no longer a joke because the year of mobile happened last year in the US. The yellow is time spent on mobile, the blue is time spent on the desktop, and the striped line is time spent in-app. And so in 2012, the discussions that we were having were more about readiness, understanding that the year of mobile was going to come. We didn't know when it was going to come, so it was telling people what they needed to do. Last year, it turned much more into how they do it, and we had publishers that were getting over 50% of their traffic in mobile. Another big thing happened last year, late last year and into early this year, and that was that apps alone passed time spent on desktop. Right? So the trend continued, but apps are surging. It's important to note, though, that this is time spent. It's not impressions or revenue. But time spent is a leading indicator of ad spend. And so we forecast, and we would imagine, that revenue will come. But time spent is not necessarily the same thing as revenue, as we'll spend a little bit more time on. So with this massive growth in mobile, we talked to publishers a lot about what their strategy needs to be. And a couple years ago, a lot of people equated apps with mobile, so they just built apps. And what's important to know is that you need a two-pronged strategy. You need a mobile web strategy, and you need an app strategy. So this is a basic overview, but I'll go through it just so that we level set. Right, your mobile web on the left is accessed through a browser. Every phone has a browser. It's the same interface that you're used to on the desktop, by and large. It requires an internet connection, and you're somewhat limited in features. The speed of use is fairly fast. The development cost is reasonable because you're using the same development teams, by and large, that you're using on the desktop site. You don't need to run through an app store, and you don't need any approvals. On the right side is the app, right? So this is a piece of software that the user is installing. The user interface is usually more interactive. It's available offline, and you can make more use of phone features like GPS, camera, etc. Speed of use is very, very fast. Development cost is very expensive because it's typically a separate development team. You do generally run through one of two app stores, either the Apple App Store or Google Play. And with the App Store, it does require an approval process. Now, there's a lot of discussion about the merging of these two and that this chart may become obsolete in the next couple of years, but we're not there yet. But we are getting closer where mobile web, the UIs are getting much better, much faster, and mobile app are actually getting, are being treated in some ways like sites in the operating system. So let's now lift the hood. We'll start with app, and then we'll move on to web. So within app, people love their apps. Users love their apps. The media loves apps, right? And the reason why is apps drive tremendous engagement. People who are using apps are much more engaged than those same users on the parallel mobile web properties. So there was a study done of 56 million mobile impressions, and it showed that 10%, so that the app users, the 10% that were app users, are generating 35% of the impressions, right? And the percentage that were mobile web, which was 90%, they're generating just 65% of the impressions. So that being said, so apps drive a tremendous amount of engagement, but it's also true that apps are where your most engaged users will be. In order for them to jump through the hoops and the cost of installing your app, they are going to be your most engaged users. So it's not entirely clear whether, if it's chicken or egg, but your most engaged users are likely they would have been more engaged on your mobile website anyway, but now they're using your app. And so the use cases that you develop for your app should be geared toward those most engaged users, right? They're finding you in the App Store. They're downloading you. They're using you. It's taking up space. And the most successful apps are those that are meant for power users who will use that property either multiple times a day, high frequency use, multiple times a day, multiple days per week. And they're also offering app-only capabilities. So the ones that mirror what's in the mobile web in app are not rising to the top of the charts. So apps drive a tremendous amount of engagement. Now let's look at how users use their apps. So there was a study that came out earlier this spring that talked about how users, this is a US-based study, and I think Brazil would probably skew more social than the US, but what it looked at was how people are spending their time on their phones. And it was pretty eye-opening / alarming. Right? It's 86% of the time people are spending in-app, and just 14% they're spending in mobile web. And of that total time, a third of it is games. All right? So people like playing on their apps with their downtime. And another 28% or so is in social. People are sharing. People are communicating with others. And then there's a video component down here as well. Right, so you take these three components, right? They are playing, they're sharing, and they're watching. This is what people are spending all their time on their phones, right? So from a time spent standpoint, it's playing, it's sharing, it's watching. And what's interesting is a lot of the traditional web publishers are under-indexed considerably here, right? News is at 3-ish%. Yeah, 3. Yeah, there we go. And commerce is not even on here. Right, so this came out in April. It was a study on its own, but to confirm it, Nielsen came out with a study shortly thereafter that confirmed the same thing. This is what's going on. This is what people are using their apps for, and in turn, their phones for. Right? They're using it for social. They're using it to talk to each other. Right? There's some productivity in there, and they're using it to watch videos. So that's what's happening, and everyone is so excited, right, about building apps. But before you go into building these apps, keep in mind, actually, let me just go back one. Take a look at where your vertical is. And understand if your vertical is one that is more inclined to take up that space, that time of users on their phones, right? And so what's happened in a lot of ways is that people are using social as a way to discover what's going on the web. That's how they surf the web, right? So between the 14% in browser, right, and the 28%, I now think of social as being another browser. It's how people are discovering web content. And so as you look at where your vertical fits in, also know what the headwinds are in your face as to becoming a successful app, right? So there are over 2 million apps in the App Store and Google Play. Discoverability is very, very difficult. There's no contextual search. The way that you get to the top of these ranks is by being the top grossing or the top installs. And the best way to do that is with a very aggressive search marketing or user acquisition marketing budget. So not only is discoverability hard, but your addressable audience is also fairly small. So if apps are for your most engaged users, then you take your total user base and you look at who's the most engaged. From there, you then say, okay, what percentage of them are likely to install the app? And then how many of them that install the app are going to use the app? And then those that are using the app, how many of them are going to regularly use the app? And the number can get very small. 50% of all installed apps are used less than 6 times. And almost 2/3 of smartphone owners report using up to 5 apps a day at the most. Right? So can your app be one of those top 5? Will you be able to beat out, and for some of you, you will, for some of you may not be able to, but will you be able to beat out Angry Bird, the games and the social apps that people are using? So from a revenue standpoint, what's happening in apps, 50% of the top 400 grossing apps are games, and those games contribute 70 to 90% of the revenue. So it's dominated by games. And games have cracked somewhat of a nut in what the business model is within app, and it's paid content. So freemium, free to try, but with premium content to unlock that you have to pay for. They use in-app purchases. And in-app purchases are 92 to 98% of all the revenue that's being reported by these app analytics companies. So ad monetization is generally lower on mobile web due to 3 primary factors. One is the device ID, right, versus a cookie. So we talked earlier about retargeting, right? And the retargeters are using cookie lists, and it's taken 10-ish years for buyers to understand how to target cookie lists. In apps, they now need to work with lists of device IDs. So the buyers aren't fully there on device ID lists and how to retarget. Also, there are no contextual clues. Up until recently, there was no way for us to determine what the content is of your app so that we could determine then the most relevant ads. There's some features that we're coming out with that will certainly improve that, but historically we haven't had it. And formats. The formats by and large that are in app are the 320 by 50, which is the banner, right? And those just don't perform as well. Apps also require separate development resources that are diverted from the mobile web, and it needs a lot of care, right? There are updates, there's device fragmentation, and there are emerging operating systems that you need to develop for. So that's the world of apps. They're huge, and they're growing even more, dominated by games and social networking, but they're very hard to be successful at. If we look now at mobile web, the type of activity that's occurring within app is actually a significant driver of mobile web traffic, right? All these people that are in social, that are discovering content in their stream, right? They're driving a lot of mobile web traffic. So Quantcast did a study, this top graph. They looked at iOS page views, and they said up to a quarter of them, the mobile web traffic is coming within app. So when people are in their social media apps and they're clicking into articles, they're staying within the app. And that's getting counted in that pie chart as social, even though they're on your sites. And then the lower graph is showing how social is driving referrals, right? They looked at the top 250 news and entertainment sites, and they looked at what the referrals are to mobile web, and a third of it is from social. So when we think back to that chart, right, the headlines that came from that chart suggest that the mobile web is on its last legs, right? The headlines, apps continue to dominate the mobile web, the decline of the mobile web, and my favorite, the mobile war is over and the app has won. But when you look at the data past that, it tells a very different story. And again, separating time spent from value is very important. So of that 86%, right, whoops, hold on, wrong button. Of that 86%, right, if you add video and gaming, that's 40%, and social is 28%. So this is great if you're building the next Facebook, or if you're building, or if you're in games or in video, right? This is what people are using it for. There's a lot of competition there. If you're not, then you've got 20% left and you're competing with millions of other apps for that 20%. Right? So the 14% that's on mobile web, just because they're not spending as much time, they're searching, they're finding what they need, and then they're going back to play. And so we did a very large study surveying over 29,000 smartphone users across 9 industries, right? And we asked users what their preferences were. And what they said for commercial tasks, we said, what do you prefer, mobile web or app for commerce, for commercial tasks? And 66% of them said they prefer sites, they prefer mobile web over apps. And another 28% said they use apps and mobile web equally, right? So that's 94% of users are relying on mobile web for commercial tasks. So commerce is a mobile web category in aggregate. And then there was a study done by the Pew Research Center around news. And 72% of them said they rely on mobile web for news. So between social and mobile web, that's where a lot is happening within the news category, for example. We'll talk a little bit about news aggregator apps as well. So this importance of mobile web becomes more clear when you look at how people are using their phones. And there's a very high reward for mobile-friendly sites. A couple years ago, we did a study. We asked users, we showed them lots of sites, both on phones, both mobile optimized and not. And nearly 3/4 of them say they're more likely to revisit mobile-friendly sites. So not only are they more likely to visit, the positive, but they also said if they don't find what they like, they will abandon the task. Right? So if they do a search on their phone and they get to something and they click through and it's not a mobile optimized site, right? 79% of them say they're likely to go back to search and look elsewhere. And they're 5 times more likely to abandon it altogether. So all of these years that you've spent cultivating customer loyalty can go out the window without a mobile optimized site. If they get there, they don't see what they like, they'll just go and they'll find someone else who has the mobile optimized site where the experience is much better. So this is all very important for publishers, but it's also very important for Google. And because of that, we recently did another big study to develop the best practices around mobile site design. So we did 119 hour-long usability sessions across multiple locations. We asked users on their phones to look at 100 different sites across multiple verticals. And the research, the feedback that we got, we took it all in, and our design team output the 25 principles of mobile site design. And I listed the URL here. I don't have a chance today to go into all of it, but it's broken into 5 main categories. It talks about homepage and site navigation, what's the type of content that you should have on your mobile site, how to structure your navigation, how to make sure your site search is working well and very visible, commerce and conversions. It spends a lot of time optimizing conversions. A big part of that is form entry. And then lastly, it covers usability and form factor. When is the right time to ask for permission to use GPS? It spends time on responsive design as well. So taking all of this into account, right? There's like, what do you do now, right? Apps are so important, but mobile web is too. So how do you prioritize? First things first is you need a mobile optimized site. If you don't have a mobile optimized site, then you're sort of not going to do well, right? That's it, within that social stream, everyone is clicking through to your mobile optimized site. In addition, from search, that's where they're getting to. So you have to have a mobile site in order to play. Secondly, fish where the fish are. Everyone is on their phones in social. You have to get in the stream. And not only that, it would make sense for your mobile strategy to contain your social strategy. And then for some of you, it might mean that they're one and the same. And the publishers who are breakout successes within publishing, within mobile, are by and large those that have figured out how to win in social, right? They're driving way more traffic than anyone else. After you've got sort of these pieces down, consider using existing apps, right? Existing, if you're news or reader, article type content, look at the apps that are out there. At least, I've listed here Google Newsstand, Flipboard, Pulse, and Feedly. And this is a publisher, Gigaom, and they don't have a traditional Android app, right? They're running everything through these reader apps, right? And so these, a lot of news consumption is happening in news aggregator apps. So rather than have 5 different apps on your phone, one for each source, they're having one app where they're importing each source. It's much more convenient for the user. In Google Newsstand, I can't speak for the rest, but for Google Newsstand, you can monetize that traffic as well with our products. You can sell it directly. You can insert your direct sales within there. And if for those impressions that you haven't sold, you can it's up to you, run ad exchange. Right? But here are some great examples, and even the social apps that are out there. You can use those apps as your app strategy if it doesn't make sense for you to build your own apps or if you don't think users are going to be there. Get your content where the users are is a consideration rather than trying to build a standalone app to get users to come to you. So if you want to build an app, first, make sure you know what your goals are. Right? Is it revenue? Is it brand value? User acquisition, stickiness, right? What are you doing for your most loyal users and what is the value that you want to get out of it? Because historically in the last few years, publishers haven't been clear. There's just been a frenzy to build apps. They're out there. It's like a ghost town in some of these apps and there's very little revenue that's coming in. But they feel great about it and they can talk about it at cocktail parties. So if that's the value, then you should build them. Secondly, identify your power user use cases. Right? What can your app uniquely offer your loyal, engaged users? And are you replicating the same content, or are you building a utility? Or are you complementing maybe your print channel or your video channel? Right? You should be doing things that are separate from what your mobile site does, because these are the users that, again, are most engaged. And then lastly, how do you want to build it? You can go native cross-platform, which is iOS or Android generally. You could also consider web apps, right? And those are HTML URLs that look and feel just like an app, but you don't have to go through the app stores. And lastly, you should promote it to a ready audience, right? Do you know who your loyal users are? Can you target them with house ads? Rather than putting a splash screen, once someone comes to you from search, they've never been to you before, and you're asking them to install your app. It's very unlikely, the data suggests, that they're going to install your app and then use it, right? So you should be promoting it to a ready audience. From a monetization standpoint, in terms of app and mobile web, far and away the highest yielding unit for you from an ad monetization piece is the interstitial, followed by the 320 by 50 banner. You'll want to make sure you keep your SDK current to take advantage of the latest formats. And it's worth considering the freemium or in-app purchase model. Right? Most media companies aren't there yet. But a lot of media companies tried micropayments in the early 2000s. The technology just wasn't there. It's now there, and it's worth thinking about. From a mobile web standpoint, the 300 by 250 is the winning unit. It allows you to sell the same unit across all screens, followed by the 320 by 50. And the adhesion banner, that's the banner that stays at the bottom of the screen even as you scroll. That performs well, but the 300 by 250 is the winner. So to sum things up, right, apps are huge. And the biggest categories are in games/entertainment and social networking. But apps are also very hard, best for your most loyal users. And the mobile web is universal. It's best for reach rather than engagement, and it's symbiotic with your social apps, right? So your social strategy should be very strong on your mobile website. And in terms of prioritizing your mobile strategy, first look at your mobile web presence. You've got to be there. Then get yourself in the stream. Fish where they are. Then optimize your RSS feeds, especially as we go to watches and cars. Right? RSS feeds are going to become an important component that will keep you relevant and your ability to get where people are. Distribute from existing successful apps. And last, know your goals and identify your use cases for mobile web and for app. So that wraps up this portion. Thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting many of you at drinks in just a bit. Thanks.